and the place meet together.
The
The play, this particular play, which was written in Ukraine in 1836, in one place and time, now this is meeting together here. It is also like a kind of embrace, you know. And then something new is emerging. And that is how it is. Creativity is always like this. Creativity is, what is creative? Creative is to be together and then bring your own impulse. You know, that is how it unfolds. Now let us come to corruption as a theme. And what is the challenge of corruption? And of course, you know, there are many kinds of corruption. Let me give you a picture from India. In India, now this government inspector, inspector in India, there are inspectors for everything. Inspector of schools, and my picture of the inspector is also very close to this picture from the play. In the school, the inspector would come, and when this inspector comes to inspect the teaching in the school, then that is a day for feast, killing of the chicken. Not for the children, but only for the inspector and one or two people, you know. And there, of course, there's a lot of corruption in the school system. Many teachers do not teach, you know. And I know that even some schools, there is teacher, but this teacher does not come. She employs another person.
Another person.
So, and it is a true story, because, and it also happens in Sri Lanka. Because I was in Sri Lanka, my first visit to Sri Lanka was in 2005, you know, and I was received by a very kind professor of sociology. He put me in the university guest house, and the guest house caretaker, who is employed by the university, he lives like a king, very kind man, but he does not do the work. He is as a permanent employee, he has more income. So with that, he can hire somebody with whom he can pay less and have a royal life, you know. So you can see how corruption works, you know. And so who are the victims of corruption? Everybody, you know. But at the same time, let us also not live under an impression that everybody is corrupt. And there are anthropologists who have done study. There is a great anthropologist from England, Professor Jonathan Perry, and he writes that, like everything, you know, we vilify the system, but everybody is not corrupt. And for him, most of the people in the government are not corrupt, and therefore it is working. And my own experience is almost similar, you know. Sometimes you meet corrupt people. But many times, you know, the governmental system, there are many people who are, you know, they are not just there to extract money from you. And my own experience also validates that. But at the same time, corruption is a great challenge. And in India, last year, one of the most significant movement that happened was against corruption. You might have heard about it. And it is called India Against Corruption. It was led by a great Gandhian activist. His name is Anna Hazare. You can read more about him. His life is very interesting. Anna Hazare. And he gave such a challenge to corruption, and that challenge came almost 30 years after. Because in 1974, there was a great movement against corruption in India, which almost toppled the government of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, who was a powerful leader, you know. She was a greatly respected stateswoman from our country, Indira Gandhi, including her contribution speaking about environment. There was a great summit, UN summit on environment in Stockholm in 1972, in which Indira Gandhi had made this important comment that poverty is the great polluter. So she tried to bring the challenge of poverty to the challenge of environment, which again is a critical challenge today. As we are talking about environment, we must link these two things together. So therefore, India has some history of fight against corruption. But as you can imagine, this fight against corruption is also fight for democracy. And then later on we would link it also to economy, you see. Because corruption and democracy, a democratic society would be less corrupt, you know. If we have checks and balances, rules, you know. So after 1974, last year, 2012, had this great battle against corruption in which many young people were involved. And this movement could really create so much ripples, including one very important thing happened, that Anna Hazare with his supporters, mainly young people, and also speaking about communication, many film stars, they all came and sat in hunger strike. And the parliament of our country agreed to negotiate with Anna for a bill called Jan Lokpal Bill. It means People's Bill of Accountability. Because government was offering a bill which was just a kind of a sugar-coated way. And people could see the loopholes, and they proposed a People's Accountability Bill. And what was also very significant is that they demanded that in the making of the bill, the activists from civil society must be consulted. And I was interviewed in a television about what is the significance, how do I look at it. And I had this comment that this is a very important movement, not only against corruption, but also for another reason. Because so far in our democracy, we elect representatives, okay? And then they make law. So while coming to making of law, people have very little direct participation. So now that kind of law and democracy and parliamentary institution is not adequate. We must move towards a much more shared form of decision making, including sharing of sovereignty. Sharing. Shared, you know. So, and that is very significant also for regional democracy. Later on I would like to link what is the significance for region. Because the region is a very important space. It is not too small, nor it is too big, isn't it? And it is a kind of human space where we can interact, you know. And today the future of economy and democracy lies in creative regionalization. And it has very significant economic implications as well as political implications and also ecological implications. So therefore this happened. The government of India agreed. There is a resolution in the parliament. Of course, another sad story that by political maneuver they didn't really fulfill that. But at least this initial agreement is something that it points to that what people can do, you know, fight against corruption. Anna Hazare, I listened to him once. And in his speech, this speech, he was not just only talking against corruption, he was talking about an alternative developmental model with more power with the grassroots, And so therefore you can see, and he was also wanted to fight for the right of land and water, There was another very important movement in India, and it is a very creative movement. It is called Ekta Parishad. Ekta means unity. Parishad means forum for unity. Now this movement is a very creative movement, and this last year on October 2nd, the birthday of Gandhi, 60,000 people came together, mainly poor, tribal and the low caste people, and also all others, professors, journalists, And we walked together for 10 days, sleeping on the street, by the roadside, eating food only once a day, fighting for the right of land. And that is also linked to corruption. Because many of the tribal people, they do not have any land. There is a forest. Earlier, people had access to the forest. Now, because of the logic of governmentalization of everything, now the forest has become the government property. Earlier, it was village commons, which is different from governmentalization, And the forest, there is a forest guard. So for even to have a leaf from the forest, and you can see what kind of corruption, again. So they were fighting for land, and of course, how do you go beyond this corrupt system of the forest guards? And it was a great mobilization, and again, after 10 days, the government of India made an agreement that we would make a solution to this problem in 6 months, So, now all these things then bring us to this whole issue of corruption and sustainable development. Because what is happening, especially in many countries, everywhere, we want to lead a good life. Buy a house, have a car, And it requires a lot of money. But why should one have a car? Why should everybody have a car? If it is necessary, I do not have a car, and nor do I think I would have ever a car in my life. And I bicycle. And to bicycle in the street of Chennai is not that easy. I wish that every country was as beautiful as Sweden and Denmark, so that you had a separate path for the bicyclists, And this is a great thing in terms of intercultural learning. Let learning take place from both ways. Let people of India and China learn from the bicycling culture of Sweden and Denmark. In terms of city planning, it is a great violence that is being done in India and China. All the roads today are being colonized by the cars. And what is happening, that it is not only contributing to climate change, in the most disastrous way, but how many people are getting killed on the road. And in fact, these car drivers, they think that the road is their personal property. They have very little respect for life, So, therefore, it is again a kind of corruption, especially in many countries, to have something. People want to be corrupt, to buy a jewelry for one's wife, And, there are many stories of corruption, that where you would have to buy, and it is a question, very existential question, And if you do a study of corruption, so many of these would be related to this, How do you give education to your children? especially in a very difficult world, education. Therefore, to transform corruption, we should have a system which provides equal opportunity for all. And in India and in many countries, it is possible. And as it is possible to give quality health care to everybody in the USA, but they do not do that even after all the hue and cry. So to come back to, I think, to move towards a corruption-free world, we must link it to provision of decent opportunity for everybody. That is the wider struggle. At the same time, there is a question of meaning of life. Now, if we link why we are living for, the great writer, if our dramatist, playwright was from Ukraine, maybe at the same time, his contemporary is Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy. He wrote a very important story, how much land a person need, And similarly, Gandhi asked the same question, Now, if we have meaning in our life, then our dependence on material goods would be minimized. We need certainly some material goods, but if we get satisfaction in mutual fellowship, as it is happening now, as in the cafe you are cooking together and you are not just concerned about the cost and benefit, isn't it? So therefore the meaning of life, how do we create many circles so that people can realize a meaning of life which is of joy to them, And once we find that joy in being together, which is most of the time free, some of the most precious things in life are free. Air, water was free until recently. Even now in Sweden, water is free, isn't it? We do not know how long this is going to continue. We cannot be certain about it, So I think the great challenge today, how do we make those things free, which was free until now? This is the challenge for the global common goods. If we are linked to the United Nations, a new politics of humanity today has to revolve around providing safe common goods like water, internet, and of course air to everybody, education. So we would have to link this to a new education. So far, our education has, as Osa was mentioning, in the university, the only concern is how do we prepare to make profit. So the modern education system is based upon exploiting nature. Now we know that this is not sustainable. And it is not sustainable because we are so good to realize it, but it is a question of life and death. If we do not realize it, we are not going to live. In fact, just a month ago in Berlin, I was part of a very important dialogue called the Anthropocene. Because in the geological evolution, what is happening, now human beings have intervened so much with the planet that it has become the anthropocentric moment. And now geologists are saying that whether human beings should survive or not, it is the great question. We may not think about it, but if you look at what is going to happen after 500 years or so. So to come back to, we would have to have an education which wants to be with earth and have life and flourishing rather than just exploit earth. So, and it is in that sense we have to realize a sense of Mother Earth. And coming to region, that there was a great thinker from Japan. His name is Makiguchi. He was a school teacher. and he was teaching geography. And I think in Scandinavia, one important revolution happened with education, isn't it? In Denmark, with the folk high school movement and people's education. So therefore, that way, Makiguchi wrote a book called Towards a Geography of Human Life. And in that he has paid so much of attention to region. He is saying that the most important identity for a person is to which region we are born. Geographically, the topography, isn't it? By the sea or the mountain or the valley, what kind of crops it grows. Now the nation state has emerged as a very artificial construction. Therefore, planning for the nation state almost it has dictated what is going to happen in the region. And that has created a lot of violence, including destroyed our potential. So therefore, a new kind of recovery has to begin with our own local. And that local, what kind of food would like to eat, what kind of cheese, And once I asked my friend in Amsterdam, do you like the cheese from Denmark? And he said, yes, but I do not want to deprive